Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another spectacular guest. He is a University of Nebraska College of Law graduate and currently works as an associate attorney at Singleton and Schreiber and as an adjunct professor at New Mexico Highlands University. He's held past positions as an associate attorney at Jones, Sneed, Wertheim, and Clifford, and as an associate attorney at Hinkle, Shanar. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Damon Hudson. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast, and ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Nate. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to have you here, Damon, today, and I'm ready to get into it. But Damon, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Damon Hudson, born and raised actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then I went to, as they call it, University near Mom, or Harvard on the Rio Grande out at UNM for undergrad, and then I goofed around a little bit after college and went back to get a master's degree and didn't like that, and then decided to what do I do now? And as many people decided to go to law school, and so did that. Went to great old Nebraska for law school, and then my wife and I moved back to Santa Fe, New Mexico, actually, which is where I live now. And I bounced around in a lot of different roles, but now I focus only on plaintiff's personal injury, car accidents, medical malpractice, and then really enjoy getting to help people doing that. And so I do plenty of volunteering, pro bono work, but the main thing I do is PI, and then really the main thing I do is I'm a dad and husband. So I got a little 2.5-year-old, and that's the best thing about my day.
Well, I love to hear about the 2.5-year-old and the beautiful family that you have. I hope to have a family myself one day. I always give the late congratulations.
Sure.
Listen, I'm giving it. I'm giving the congratulations.
little late, yeah.
A little late. 2.5 years. Listen, it's not that much time. But let's go all the way back to 2013, actually, before you even get to law school, which you arrived there in 2016 at the University of Nebraska College of Law. You were at the University of New Mexico, or the University of Near Mom. I love that, by the way. That tipped me off there. I love that one. But you were there. You were at their School of Management till 2013. And then that following year in 2014, you ended up at the University of New Mexico, and you got a master's in public administration. So, Damon, before we get to law school, why did you decide to get your master's once you got out of college?
So I went and I was a traveling fraternity consultant for the first year after. So I got to go. So actually, the only time I've ever been to Northern New York was like the Finger Lake region and traveling there. And so right out of out of undergrad, I had an offer to go get a master's degree at Nebraska for a leadership program. And I got this job offer. I was like, well, when am I going to get to travel the country? And so I took that job offer, and I said, can I defer for a year? And Nebraska said, yeah. And it's the day I moved to Chicago for my job, I got a call and said, oh, wait, never mind. So it kind of changed my future. And then I did that year of traveling. It was fun, but I was like, well, I don't think this is forever. And so then I applied to a master's degree. My now wife, she was in it. And honestly, I had a good way to get back home. It was nothing against the program. It was just not for me. I didn't think I wanted to go into government. It taught me enough to know I should go to law school. I got 2 years of studying to go, I should go to law school. And so that was, it was good programs, but I realized I was like, I need to do something more substantive that I can wrap my hands around, and it's a little more tangible.
So eventually you found that tangible thing You ended up at the University of Nebraska College of Law in 2016 after getting your master's of public administration. Now, simply put, Damon, why'd you go to law school?
Well, so as as a younger person, I didn't have a ton of direction at the time. I think it was very much like grasping at straws of what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like I had a goal. I didn't know what my 5-year plan looked like or anything like that. And on it for the first time, I didn't know what I want to do. So I thought, what did I want to do as a kid? And I thought I wanted to be an NFL football player, and that wasn't going to work out. And I don't think I was going to change into that. And then I had wanted to be a lawyer. And so I think I spent a summer thinking about what that would be like. I did some looking into LSAT programs and talking to, and of course, I got the line that everyone loves of "Don't go to law school," right? Which I think is always a little out of line. But I thought through it, and I really the two things I found that I would be able to do from being a lawyer, where you get to help people and then problem solve. And so, I think it's very much like the ability to help people work through something. And I think help people can be so many different things in the law, but it was at that time I didn't know what any of what I know now. But so I spent a whole summer exploring, and then was an academic advisor at the business school I went to, and I had plenty of time to study on the side and and apply to law schools. And so within a year in 2016, I ended up at the University of Nebraska again, having almost gone there for a master's degree program 4 years before.
So, starting at the University of Nebraska College of Law in 2016, we always love talking about the first year. Some people hate it, some people love it. How was it for you, Damon? And as well, I have to tag a question on there. You're going from New Mexico, which the only thing, not that New Mexico is bad, the only thing I know about New Mexico is Walter White. So that,
Sure.
I mean, it's a great brand. It's a great brand, I
Yeah.
have to say. If that's who's representing your state, that's an amazing thing because I love Walter White. But how was that environment change going from New Mexico, which is probably beautiful weather all the time, to Nebraska in the Midwest? It's always snowing, it's always raining, it's always cold. So how was that first year and how was that environment adjustment like?
I first got to say, I mean, if you're going to watch Walter White, you got to watch Better Call Saul. But I don't know if us as New Mexicans want to claim Walter White and Saul as the representatives of the state. Um, but so I had visited Nebraska a number of times, right? I mean, you deal with enough humidity that's awful. Nebraska is great in the sense that sometimes there's only summer and winter. There's no middle season sometimes. But on it, it was perfect for. I mean, my wife and I got married after the first year we moved out there together. It ended up being the perfect thing for my marriage in the sense of we had to we started building our I mean it was just us and we had a kid years later, but we started building what is now our family. It was just kind of an opportunity to explore something new. I know that when you're a young kid, you're probably not idealizing Lincoln, Nebraska as the place where I'm going to establish my family and my life, but it became kind of this like home away from home. My grandparents used to talk, and they're in the military, and they talk about Denmark in that way, and in the same way that my wife and I talk about Lincoln, Nebraska. But it became it was the perfect thing for me because I think that if I had gone to law school at New Mexico, which great law school, I would have really resorted to a lot of undergrad habits that maybe were not the most conducive to a more rigorous law school schedule. And so it was great for me. I found we loved the snow. I really began to like the humidity after a while. The people were great. I made good friends out there. The bike trails, like so many parts about Lincoln were so perfect for what we wanted and needed that I've never regretted that decision. It was the best for me because it kind of set me on a path that was great. Now going into specifically law school itself, I think I took in undergrad, I thought I don't want to work that hard. And so I took management classes that were easier. And I had some hard classes, and then my master's degree wasn't hard. But law school, very early on, like the first day, right, I had read for class, but the first day, somebody hadn't read for class and it still sticks in my mind. And this teacher was like, "You're not ready to be here." And I remember being like, whoa. It wasn't to me, but I was like, okay, that's not the thing you want coming out. And so it was like very clearly the first day, the effort has to be there. But I liked the rigor, right? You're working through problems. You're seeing like what's the line as they say, the first year is to like break you down. And then the second year is to build you up. And I don't know about that, but I found I liked the rigor of it. I liked getting to talk to people about things. It's interesting to see people from the ages of like 21 to 45 coming in who are all kind of, none of us know anything. So it's like kind of interesting. Everyone's on this equal playing ground. And then the opportunity to start like seeing this problem solving, and it just morphed into, I started to see some of what I could do, right? And looking back, I didn't know anything as a 1L, but I thought it was a ton of fun. I liked getting to just meet more people and talk to them and connect with people. But it was hard in the sense of like I never had to work that hard in school, and I never enjoyed having to work that hard in school until law school.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point you're making there is that because of the fact you're working so hard, you're actually enjoying it more because it's harder problems, more complex problems. You really got to break them down. You really got to use your mind to its fullest capacity to really figure these things out. And doing that, contrary to probably popular belief, it actually makes you feel better than worse because once you solve that problem, you're like, oh my God, now I could do it again and again and again and again. So in speaking to people, building those connections, having that support system around you, how important was having that support system throughout your entire law school career?
I mean, I think law school would have been 100 times harder without my wife. Like it very much having, first off, having someone outside the bubble of law school, like it just to like maybe not like eat, but like pull me back down into the real world. I think it's easy to you're with people talking about the law and the ideas of the law all day, and so having that like real world thing of her going, no, no, that's not like, let's not talk about that right now, and like just she's the absolute best, right? It would have been so much harder without her, but that support, because it was really the two of us out in Lincoln. We had neither of us had lived there, and so my support system started there. But we actually had friends from New Mexico who happened to live in Lincoln, and so my old Greek advisors in undergrad ended up moving there, and like we became family friends. We went back and visited recently, and so like we developed relationships, and then we made friends with people out there again. Like I went back to Lincoln, Nebraska earlier this year, and so we developed it, but it was more my wife and then like kind of family we had built. We knew from New Mexico, and a chance to talk about green chili or Dion's, or like having that connection in Nebraska was not expected, but really made that whole transition easier. And so it's like built. I think part of it going somewhere new was building that relationship, and so yeah, it was exciting to. It made Lincoln feel like our own home, even though neither of us was from there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Lincoln, Nebraska is one of the best places in the entire country. I have to now go. Listen, Damon, I got this giant bucket list of all the places that I have to go, that all the guests have told me to go to, and now I could add Lincoln, Nebraska on there because clearly
Yeah.
it sounds like a great place to be. There's a lot going on, and I just can't wait. I can't wait to go there. But moving forward in your law school career, that first summer, you had a summer associateship at Klein, Williams, Wright, Johnson, and Old Father, so many names there. And then
Yeah.
you were a summer associate at Kutak Rock, and then an associate attorney at Hinkle Shinar, which came towards the end of your law school career. So, can you talk about those experiences? And within talking about those experiences, what I love talking on this podcast is finding out what you do want to do with the law in terms of specialization, but also especially finding out what you don't want to do with the law and narrowing down. So can you talk about how through those experiences you kind of did that, or maybe you didn't do it?
So I think one of the challenges I have, so I do plaintiff's work now, and I think law school, in my experience, or at least my law school, nothing against Nebraska, but a lot of what's sold is bigger firms that do defense work. There's a prestige to it, which these firms have been around for a long time. They've worked to develop a good name for themselves. But looking back, I didn't like either of those three jobs you mentioned. I mean, I'll be frank, like I wasn't good. It was all defense work. I wasn't good at it. Like I don't think it just didn't mesh with what I wanted to do. And it was you're working for big companies, or you're doing things, which nothing wrong with that. And the people I worked there were perfectly nice. But like the first summer, you have absolutely no clue what you're doing. And I left that summer not knowing much more of like I don't think I didn't learn enough to know I didn't like defense work, because then I did defense work again the following summer, and then I did defense work. My first job out of law school was that one, doing medical malpractice defense, and not until a year into that, in a COVID pandemic, did I go, oh, I don't think I like this. I don't think I like working on behalf of insurance companies. Again, no disrespect to people who do. I think we all have our different direction and find the things we like, but it just wasn't for me. It was I felt like in each of those, the first two, right, you're a summer associate, so you're just doing duties as assigned, is really all that work is. And my school was great, and getting everyone a job. Like that was one of the things that was awesome at Nebraska. I remember if you didn't have a position, the staff there would do whatever it took to make sure you had a summer job that was paid, which I hear is super unusual. And so I think my those first three experiences are all ones in which I did not it didn't work for me. I learned I didn't like defense work. I learned the billable hour game wasn't for me. But I also, even in the middle of that, I had a brief 2-week job at the Nebraska Attorney General's office, and then I unfortunately had to get back surgery in the middle of law school, and so that really threw. I had to quit that job. I ended up being, I don't know if anyone refers to me as this, but I ended up becoming right before I graduated. So I graduated in 19, so like that a year or two before that, I was doing school from Zoom for a semester. At the time, it seemed pretty unusual. I knew not a lot of people were doing it. I mean, 2 years later, everybody was doing it, right? But so I think in the middle of it, maybe I didn't think about it as much, and maybe getting back surgery kind of threw me off of spending time. Like looking back now on those lessons I didn't learn, I think I'm much better now on reflecting and journaling. Whereas the time I maybe didn't think, okay, and I'll be frank, both of those summers of law school, I did not get offers to come back. I don't think it, and looking back, it was devastating. Like I was like, oh, it feels very much a marker of who you are and your success. And looking back on it, it was the best no's I could have gotten, because maybe I would have stayed at a job that I would have never. The stuff I do now is exactly what I needed to be doing, is exactly with my personality. Um, but I don't think I spent a lot of time reflecting on how these things don't work for me, and I think I was kind of chasing that job with a nice title, or at a good firm, or with smart people, right? They're smart people at all these, and so it feels very. I don't know what I didn't know, right? I don't come from a family of lawyers. My parents were teachers. I guess my godfather was a lawyer, but we never talked about it beforehand. I didn't know. You don't really know what it looks like until you do it, unless you have family who do it that you can go to. But I just never had that experience, and so those summers and that first job, it just wasn't for me. And I think that, like, looking back, I regret I didn't reflect on it as much. I think that I kind of have like looking back on it, it's probably easy to say that this is like a pretty straightforward path, but it's all there's a lot of like bumps along the road. There's a lot of going, like talking to my wife, being like, did I mess up going to law school? Like after my first year of being a lawyer, I thought, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. Like I was like dreading, had I invested too much time in this? And then finally I tried something I'd never done, doing plaintiff's work, and I went, oh, okay, I was doing the wrong stuff. I was doing the stuff that wasn't for me. I was doing the stuff that didn't allow me to problem solve, didn't allow me to help people. So yeah, I spent a lot of time goofing around, learning what I didn't need to know, and learning what I didn't want to do, until I stumbled into what I like doing.
Well, like you said, some of the most valuable no's you'll ever receive in your entire life. Just like myself, getting such a terrible score in the LSAT. Well, not terrible, not great, not terrible. I always like to keep it in the middle ground there. But getting that
Sure.
151 was one of those things that led me to create this podcast. And it was well worth my time to get such a terrible score. At the time, it was terrible. I was devastated,
Sure.
absolutely devastated. Ego died, whole thing. I was like, oh my God, like this is the end of the world. And now we're doing great, just like yourself, Damon. So those no's are so valuable. But something you tipped me off on, because I listened to all your words, and you said you do a lot of reflecting now, especially journaling. So sort of within your cautionary tale, what would you tell people in order to figure out, have that reflection moments? Do you suggest people journal? What kind of journaling did you do? All those questions like that, I need answers.
I mean, no, I sometimes, like, if I'm driving, I'll put on the notes app and just dictate, right? Like, but like I generally try to, at the end of the night, write for a few minutes, and just what happened in the day, and what I'm thinking, and what I did well and what I didn't do, like things I could improve on. I think, but even some of it, I think in law school, it's really easy to get caught up in it, that I don't think I was reflecting on, do I like this? Like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is really not like a conversation that I was having with myself. And I think some of it comes from not knowing, like, right, like, it's much easier to say I didn't like defense work, but when I do 2 8-week summers, and then I start a job, and then a pandemic hits, I think some of it goes, I don't want to hold myself to task for that, but I think trying to self-reflect on journaling, therapy is great. I think sometimes as an adult, and getting past it's very different to get into the professional world, because you're going through a time of school, you graduate, school, you graduate, school, you graduate. Like, one of the best things about law school is the semester's done, you have a terrible class, you don't have to keep taking it. Whereas in the profession, right, that you have clients for years, right? And there are some that are great to deal with, and some, but you can't really you don't drop things every 6 months. you can't, you got to keep moving through them. And so I have a longer, I think a longer time span reflection, like knowing that I have a case, I sign people up like, when will this resolve? I'm like, 27 is probably reasonable for certain cases, but I am able to, I've built that in, and having that longer perspective, whereas just being on 6 month cycles of semesters really was not as easy to focus on all those things, and to reflect and kind of think through. I do want to say to your conversation though, I think that those numbers, and I think that this is maybe to you, but also like people listening, is that I think a lot of law school and a lot of those directions can feel, it can feel person defining. It can feel like that number can feel defining of who you are as a person and your merit and your value. And it just, none of it is. I think like as much as it means something, it means nothing, right? I know plenty of people who got great LSAT scores who didn't pass the bar, and plenty of people who got bad LSAT scores who are partners at firms within a couple of years. So none of it matters. But also at the same point, like one of my friends once told me, and this always like gave me comfort in law school, is they like, all of this is subjective. As much as it's built into the law, and well, you got elements, you pass the test, and every bit of it is subjective, right? There's relationships at play, there's long-standing bills, and it's all made by people. And so that was one of the things that I was able to like find comfort on early in law school, is that a friend who said that everything is subjective. And if you start to focus on that and recognize that, I think sometimes it's easier to not take it as personally, right? You still, like you talk about ego death, right? It's hard to, part of applying to law school or going that path requires some confidence in yourself to take this step to do something bigger. But you also have to realize sometimes, okay, maybe I'm not the right cup of tea for everybody, right? Those first 3 firms I worked at, I was not the right cup of tea for them, and they for me. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about that is there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with, not having that match made in heaven, and not having, it just may not work out. And there's nothing wrong with it, and no one ever takes disrespect from it. It's like, you know what? We go our separate ways. You find something else, and you find out, okay, maybe I don't want to do this. And those people find out, okay, maybe he's not right for the job. But now you have a better job. They probably have someone there who is more fit for them. So it everything works out in the end, of course, just like you said. And having that long-term vision, so important. It's very subjective. It's only a score. I think one of the best examples of this that I've heard before is Lisa Blasser. She almost failed out of law school. Literally
Mhm.
failed out of law school. And now she is, teaching students how to study for law school. So she almost failed out. And now she's giving back in that way. So the way that the world works sometimes is very, very crazy. But Damon, moving forward in your career, you became an associate attorney at Jones Steed Wertheim. See, I know someone with the last name Wertheim.
Sure.
That's why I know how to say it. And Clifford, you were there from 2020 to 2023. So can you talk about that experience? How was it?
So I remember I got the job, and they were a lot more general in the work they did. They do some union work, some criminal defense, some personal injury, estate planning, a little bit of everything. And so, but that was really my first exposure to getting to do plaintiff's personal injury work. And so, again, in my experience at Nebraska, that wasn't something that was really sold as an option, right? And maybe that's because of tort reform in Nebraska, and there are parts about Nebraska that make that less likely. But I started doing some of that work there, and I realized, whoa, this is exactly what I like doing, right? I get a chance to delve into a file. Like in my experience in PI work, is that you start doing some of it, and you start as an associate, and you have to ask yourself, what's going on in this case, and you realize who's going to have to figure this out, and the answer is me. Like in defense work, right? There was a partner who would be in charge of certain things, and there was a more formalized structure. Not that there isn't in PI work, but it's you're somebody once said you are building a boat on the plaintiff's side in civil cases, whereas the defense just needs to poke holes in it. And so you're building this story, you're coming up with a story for a case, and the direction it comes from. And I was just so enamored by what that meant. I just started delving into podcasts and books about it. There's a ton of PI stuff. I really enjoyed the union work, but I think more than any of it, and the work I got to do there, was direct with people, right? At the time, it was a little before we all just did Zoom, but getting to work one-on-one with somebody talking about a problem. I did some tenant defense, right? Some pro bono stuff, and getting to help somebody through what some may consider, right? If I'm doing $1 million litigation, I might consider a landlord tenant case small, but in those people's world, the biggest thing in their life is that their landlord isn't giving them air conditioning, or that they don't have heat or water. And so getting to work on these problems for people and help them do those things, it was just like, again, just a couple months before I'd been thinking, was the law right for me? And then I realized I started working directly with people and went, wow, I get to do something that can help people. I have a certain set of skills, right? That allows me to do that. And so it was and as I've gone on, it's been so exciting to go, somebody comes in and you have a matter that I'm not that it's all the same, but they're talking about it. I go, I know how I can help you, right? I know how I can help them. It's that problem solving of what you talked about earlier, like going again and again. Okay, we've done this enough times already in my short time. I know how we can help you. I know how we can figure it out. It's going to take time. None of these things necessarily work quickly, but I know how to help them, and I can kind of be. I like to think of myself as a guide, and so that's like I was able early on in that time there for the 2 years. I got to start being a guide. I mean, I think in being at a small firm doing PI work, there weren't a lot of other attorneys, so I had one-on-one contact with clients. I got to do depositions of experts. I got to depose treating providers in really complex cases. And I just remember at one point being like, wow, like it's like imposter syndrome, a really easy moment to kick in. And I'm like, okay, we're getting resolutions. We're winning cases for clients. I'm like, okay, all the evidence is pointing to I'm figuring this out and I'm successful. The hard part is you have to go like start, like we talk about ego, but then at the same point later it comes on, I have to believe my own BS and really go, okay, wait, I'm doing this. I'm able to help people. And so I was so thankful for that time to get to learn and get to grow in the sense of working with clients, but I really had a very long leash on getting to develop those relationships with clients. And so that was, it had been night and day for what I had seen for all my other legal jobs of just doing defense work. But in part way through it, and I think like morphs into what I assume is your next question, going to my current job, but I just realized that the PI and doing personal injury work was really what I like to do for that problem solving thing. Like I felt some of the other work, I really enjoyed it, but it was pulling me away from the thing that I was like, okay, I could be good at this. I could really help people out with this. And I can I can feel really good about how I help people, and that it kind of relates with my morals of standing up against the insurance company, right? Coming like a doctor, somebody who harmed you. Like I always, being an older brother, I always understood that like sometimes you got to step in, and that became it kind of I don't know if that's the exact one-to-one, but I always felt defensive of others. And this, I kind of feel like I can step up for somebody who doesn't know how to defend themselves, and it kind of morphed into that.
Well, unfortunately, I know nothing about being an older brother. I'm the youngest child in my family, but I know a bunch about the landlord tenant work you do.
Sure.
I'm actually on the other side of it. I'm a process
Okay.
server myself. My father owns a process serving company. Prefer
Cool.
process servers. Always got to shamelessly plug that whenever I can. But
You need a new sponsor.
exactly, exactly. Listen, my mom has said that before. She listens to this, so she's gonna hear that. She's gonna be like, "Oh, look, see my
Come
idea."
on, mom, let's do it.
But we frame ourselves because me and my brothers, we all serve. So we're sort of the Grim Reapers. We come around and
Sure.
sometimes people don't like when we come around. But in doing that work, not to burst your bubble, but you thought my next question was going to be about your next job. It actually isn't. What I want to talk about is exactly that pro bono work you were doing, the human aspect of the law, which definitely gets pushed under the rug while you're going through law school. You're reading all these cases, reading all this stuff going on, and maybe between companies, these big players. You're reading all this, but no one ever talks about that human connection that you have your people when you're sitting there one on one, helping them through their problems, get that air conditioning, get that running water, get that heat, whatever it may be. So, can you talk about the human aspect of the law and how important it's been through your career in, doing some pro bono work or just the work you do in general?
So I think in my law school was good about pressing, like doing pro bono stuff. I had like a pro bono certificate. We did some tax clinics helping people fill out their taxes. I think this is when I spent most of my time on in law school, but there were a couple other opportunities. And so I saw like somebody talked about it once, and it kind of made sense to me that like having a law degree is a privilege. And so it became very much like a duty in the sense of I have to, right? I have this ability, right? I have an ability to problem solve that I need to, like, when I can, step in and help. And so, of course, when you first start out as an attorney, for 6 months, there's not a lot of work going on. And so I was like, well, right, I wasn't getting work handed to me because I didn't know anything. However, I was like, what's a really simple area that I can help people on, that I can do some of that? And so I joined what is the ABA Free Legal Answers program, which is just like an online program all across the country. In each state, you can answer. It's like a text, it's like an email application. So I signed up for that. And I started answering questions from people there. And then I was like, okay, then I found New Mexico Legal Aid out here. And I started doing a little bit of volunteer work for them on taking a couple of cases assigned. And it just became very much like, okay, I can figure out this problem. And it really has helped inform kind of how some of the initial steps. First way I got into trial was on a landlord tenant case against a long practicing attorney who it's very much the line of, well, I've never seen that before. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like early on, it was a big confidence boost. I'm like, I think I've read the rules. And I think, but I'm also standing up for this person so that they can keep their house, right? They can stay and be housed. And it was right, especially during COVID. And so I don't want to pretend that I'll definitely give a shout out to New Mexico Legal Aid, who does like a ton of fantastic work in this area. But it became my first outlet to do any legal work. It became my first opportunity to have clients, right? It was, I guess, kind of maybe what precursored me into plaintiff's law. But I really saw it as that chance to, okay, it was something for me to help myself, but more importantly, I could help people stay in their house. I could help them solve problems. And I found a lot of the time that people are just like uninformed. Like in New Mexico, there's like simple things that I tell people all of the time that clients thought like they get a 3-day notice in New Mexico and they're like, well, I have to move out in 3 days. Like, no, 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 no. That means you have to go to court. You'll get a court date soon, but don't start moving all your stuff out. And so just being able to give people like the peace of mind of you probably have 10 more days, it was exciting. But I also saw it in the sense of like in some of the situations, like, okay, let's step in and I can help you stand up and prevent this eviction. And that was something I was able to be successful on a number of occasions. And so it really became something I've been doing free legal ABA's free legal answers for 4 or 5 years now. And I just, people come on there all the time about these like questions and they don't know where else to turn, right? A lot of the time, landlord tenant work, unless you qualify for a New Mexico legal aid, and if you know about it, you're not going to know who to ask. You're not going to be able, a lot of attorneys will charge the money for the time. And so that's not even like at this point, it's not even what I spend 10% of my work on, but it's something I enjoy doing of helping somebody answer a few questions. Usually I can guide them in the way to do that. But I found, like, again, like going back to, there was the realm of like with a JD, I felt some duty and some obligation to help others. And it felt like very much like coming from, wasn't in poverty but like my parents were both teachers, right? I felt like a lot of like people in that position, like as a renter, you just are not, you don't know the rules. As a renter, when I rented, I remember like looking back, I'm like, wow, my landlord really took me for a ride when I was an undergrad. And I could have totally prevented if I knew just these basic things that I know now. And so I've enjoyed doing that. And I try and make sure to get they suggest 50 hours a year. And I generally pretty easy to meet. And forgive me if you can hear my dog sleep dreaming in the background. But it just really became something that I felt proud to do. And I felt I made good relationships doing. And like I think it's always, people are never sure what to do as a lawyer, and like, well, I'll just donate. And it became easier for me of like, well, I can just connect with a couple more people and I can make my community a little better. And especially during COVID, I can help keep people in their house. Right. And so that was, it made me feel good. And I don't think that's the only reason I did it, but it also, I felt very happy to help people in those situations, which are some of the worst moments of your life, thinking you're on the brink of eviction. So.
Yeah, listen, I've seen it with my own eyes.
Sure.
It's tough stuff. It really, really is sometimes. You know, those 3-day notices. I'm the one giving the 3-day notices sometimes. And they always ask me, what is this about? I'm like, ma'am or sir, I got no idea. I'm just the
Sure.
messenger. Here are your papers. But
Sure.
moving forward in your career, in 2021, you became an adjunct professor at New Mexico Highlands University. You teach in business law, personal practices, and the law itself. Now, can you talk about that position you have as an adjunct professor? And I always love asking people who are professors themselves, would I want to have you as a teacher?
Would you want to have me as a teacher? So I think I do a cardinal sin of as a teacher that I wouldn't like in this regard. And I do it for undergrads and graduate students. So maybe this is helpful. I do a personal practices in the law class and a business law class. And I make them brief cases, which is something I never did in law school. I got the advice for law school to not brief cases, and I never did it. And I know, like, I was on a some professors are probably going to disagree with me. I never took any, like, I'd maybe write a sentence down about a case, but I would never highlight it, or I thought it was a total waste of time. And it saved me a lot of time not doing it. And it seemed to work out pretty well. But I have undergrads and graduate students do that as part of this stuff. I think that my classes are pretty straightforward. My goal is like, thinking back, I teach a business law class, and that was an undergrad, and I took a semester at Kansas State through the National Student Exchange Program. And I had this professor I took a business, it was the first any law class, and I just had to take it. But the way, like looking back on it, when I started applying to law school, I thought a lot about that class and how I really had liked, she was straightforward. She didn't try and like hide the ball. And so I very much try not to make it like the guessing game of like, what do I need to know? Like, this is what you need to know. This is what's going to be on the test. This is pretty straightforward, but I've liked it in the sense of it's really interesting. It's always interesting to talk to people about the law because I think you learn more when you teach, but also talking to students who don't have, right? I'm not teaching a law school course, and I don't think any of my students have mentioned to me that they're going to law school, but it's also a chance to connect to people and teach them. I think my goal of those classes is, if you're going to be a business owner, let me teach you enough to know when you need to call a lawyer. Maybe it's the moments to know when to pick up the phone, and less about the times of like, yeah, do you need to go to law school? No, you don't. If you don't want to, it doesn't. This needs. But in business law, I can teach you, hey, maybe this is a violation, and this is a discriminatory practice at the business you're at, and maybe this is the time you need to call a lawyer as a business owner. You need to stop this. And so I don't know if you like my class, Nate, but I would say I'm also not. I don't think I'm a challenging professor, but I really enjoyed it in the sense of again, it's just connecting with people, and it's in Highlands up in Vegas. So I've actually never been on campus. I'm only an online professor, which is something in the long term that I'd rather teach in person and get the benefit of the relationship. But yeah, I think I'm not a hard professor. I'm not a hard grader. I do the work.
I mean, listen, one day I'll just show up to your online class and I'll be sitting there ready to go, and I can give you a nice grade at the end. No, I'm kidding. But I think it's great that you're giving practical advice to people. That's what I always look at. That's like my bar of professors when I receive practical advice, or they talk to me about things that I'm interested in, which is like once you get me on that, especially like the philosophy classes, like
Sure.
you hook me in once, like I'll just talk forever. I'll literally talk forever. Because one, I'm trying to reteach myself things that I've learned in my,
Sure.
and then second, I just need someone to talk to sometimes. But moving forward in your career, after your time at Jones, Sneed, Wertheim, and Clifford, you then became an associate attorney at Singleton and Schreiber, which is what you do today. So can you talk about that experience, how it's been so far, and
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the future of the job?
So I was on a call. Well, I think I've told my boss this before, so I don't feel. I was the chair of the Young Lawyers Division in New Mexico, which is I'll get to your question, I promise, Nate. But I was the chair of the Young Lawyers Division recently. I'm the outgoing chair right now, and so I was on this position. We were helping run an event, and I reached out. My now boss, Brian Colon, who's a former state auditor, I had known him a little bit in undergrad and in graduate school, and I mean everyone in New Mexico knows the guy. And we were on this call for this event, and I'm like sitting in my office, and I had gone to a meeting that day. I'd gone to an expert visit. I was exhausted. I was moments away from. I like literally remember before I got in this meeting thinking, I'm not going to go to this meeting. And the last minute, I just accepted the Zoom invite and got on. And the meeting, we progressed in the event, and but at the end, he goes, "So, hey, Damon, can you stick around after?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Am I in trouble?" Like, and he starts talking to me about, well, I'm looking for somebody to do, and I knew he had just started Singleton Schreiber, was a managing partner out here, and I have my office door wide open. He goes, I'm looking for somebody to do plaintiff's person injury work. I'm like, give me a second. So I have to go close my door. And he mentions to me, like, right. And I had been at that time thinking, he's like, I like the work here, but I really just want to focus on PI. It felt like, again, it's that one-to-one with people. It's an opportunity to advance in my career, and it's to focus on these areas that I found, and then to get doing litigation. And that's like getting to battle on behalf of clients and help them fight up against powerful interests was just really enticing. And so met with him a couple times after that, did a couple brief interviews, and I started at Singleton Schreiber last year in my house. So the firm originally started in San Diego, and they do a lot more firework. And so like had come to New Mexico, from what I understand, when we had the big fires here in 22 and 23 in Las Vegas and Ruidoso. But they were looking to expand and do PI work. And so we didn't have an office space until July or August of last year. And so first 4 months, I just started out with my clients and in my little at-home office that I'm in right now. And it was kind of helping build this group out here. but it was so exciting because it kind of being on this ground floor of what we've built in New Mexico, and things have expanded so much. Our team is so much bigger than it was just this time last year. But again, it was a chance to focus solely on getting to work for people and help them fight against their insurance company after a car accident, against doctors who've harmed them, against it really just like helping people when someone else has been negligent and that's led to harm. Um, it really has become like like, what's the future? I think that I like doing this. I like getting to help people do this kind of work. It invigorates me. I I don't foresee me changing paths, right? I'm not going to become a estate planning lawyer at this point. It's just it's a real, and I mean, it's unfortunate. Like, the hard part is, I always tell clients when I meet them, right? It's like, nice to meet you. Sorry, it's under these circumstances. Like, I try not to ask how you're doing when you call, for the same sake of, usually if you're calling me, something has gone wrong. But my hope is that I can be like congenial enough and relational enough and like empathetic enough to know that I do this because I care, right? I don't have like some experience of that specifically brought me that, but I always found myself to be a pretty empathetic person, and like trying to put myself in the shoes of others. And so yeah, I kind of stumbled into this. I think the thing, as much as it sounds like I feel like I found what I want to do in the law and keep doing, I stumbled into it. I 100% stumbled into it. There's no, it feel like, again, like looking back on your past, it looks like it was a straight line, when it's so many bounces and so many mistakes along the way that led to going, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. And I've just found too, like the community of like plaintiffs and personal injury attorneys and people on LinkedIn and the podcasts, there's so many people to learn from, and so many, I really like the creative side that I feel like wasn't the case as much. Defense as a job, but I don't feel like that engenders as much creativity. Whereas on the plaintiff side, it's like, well, we can totally take a different route to this case. We can argue, make a different argument. We can bring a different claim. And so there's a lot of different hooks and ways that you can help people that maybe are just like even novel. Like, there's like, it's, you are maybe doing something that somebody hasn't done before in a case. And I mean, all the time I hear the attorneys like the line that always gets me, and I've said it already here, but well, I've never seen something like this in my 30 years. And it's like, well, I'm so glad that I could show you something new today.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. Well, I mean, that's fantastic. We always love to hear that you're enjoying what you're doing. You love what you're doing. You love waking up every day to do the job that you have to do. That's always the best thing to hear. And to your point, it is never a straight path. It is never a straight path. As I have said before, again and again and again, and I will say, eventually I'm going to get an official counter on this. But
Sure.
like we say, there is no straight path to law school. There's only your unique journey, and it's a windy road. There's a lot of different ways. You could go down a road. You could come back down that road. There's so much there they have to do, and it's such a wonderful thing. And to your point about working plaintiff, in my short mock trial experience, I only did mock trial for 2 years, but my favorite part, I love being defense, but I love doing affirmative defenses because then you could really get crazy, you could really get creative. I love the creative stuff. It's so much more I hated general defense. It's like the worst thing in the world. I only had to do it once, and I really disliked it so much because I love that creativity. I love the way that you can sort of formulate the story in a way that, of
Sure.
course, it's fake people and, fake stories. But in doing that, I really enjoyed creating that story, just like you do yourself. But Damon, we're now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions here has to do with something I've seen throughout my entire journey doing this podcast, that the law is moving in a certain way. People are adopting new technologies, either that be AI, either that be software, whatever it may be. But this is the tech stack question per se. So, what technology do you use, either at work, at home, in your personal life, and what suggestions do you have for people out there in the audience?
I mean, I think so. I do a couple of, I'm doing one next month, and I've done a couple CLEs that I've led this year on AI for lawyers. Now, I think mine is a lot more baseline. I mean, I like using ChatGPT. I think, especially younger lawyers, I think there's a lot of opportunities to find ways to use it to expand what they do. So I use ChatGPT. I'll try some of the other ones I really like Westlaw has some cool AI, Co-Counsel. I've tried out a lot of different ones of those. Honestly, one of the programs I use most on my daily basis is OneNote. I know I know it's just like a Microsoft thing, but I started using it in law school, and it's been super helpful to organize everything. But I'd say more than anything, it's like, I mean, my tech stack. I mean, Microsoft Word, right? Like everyone's and Microsoft Outlook, everyone's favorite turn-based strategy game. And so I mean, I think most of what I can do. I think the thing I like most about doing what I do now, I work from home 3 days a week. So like my life is totally reliant on being able to have tech, but I'm able to meet with clients across the state. I have clients in other states who've had issues in New Mexico. So my phone, Zoom, it's made. I came into practice in 2019, and the difference between now and then of like how willing people are to just like, okay, let's have this. I mean, you and I are time zones away, Nate. And so having I hate to like, wow, Zoom is a cool thing, and like I'm not trying to sell anybody on it right now. The ability to do that and the expansion of like being able to work a city away. So I'm in my office 2 days a week, but I'm at home 3 days a week. It's the ability to be able to do that in the modern day. With the tech I have, right? These giant monitors and all this has been like, I don't think I could ever go back at this point. And so I do want to pause you though, because you've been talking, you've last 5 questions. I have one for you that I've been thinking of. So what we're at 75, 76, 77, something like that on the podcast. And I think one of the things that I think of in the law and building up, and I know that that's something you're building towards, but I think a good lesson for people who listen and thinking about is, so I'm curious how you felt between episode 1 and now this, of like your expansion as a person, and I bet the first 5 episodes were nerve-wracking, and your thought was like, these are terrible. And I haven't listened. I'm not saying that by any means, but I bet you can notice a difference between those and now, and like that process of learning. I think not only is starting the hardest part, but then could you talk a little bit about too, like how you've built in that time and become better in your 76 episodes or so?
Oh my god, the interview's been flipped. Oh, absolutely. No, I can absolutely talk on that. Yeah, so the first, I could still vividly remember before doing my first episode, I was like, I don't think I've ever been so nervous in my entire life. Usually like around the house, I talk a lot. I'm always talking to people, like my poor roommates, my poor roommates have to listen to me talk all day long. But literally like before I started doing my first podcast, like I was silent, and even my roommate picked up on me. And he's like, "Nate, you all right?" And I was like, "I got the first podcast later." He's like, "Oh my god!" And he was all excited for me. But he's like, "Yeah, I noticed like you just completely went silent. I have my headphones on. It's like everything shut off." So yeah, like definitely those are really really nerve-wracking. But over the course of doing all these episodes, I've definitely learned to pace myself when I'm speaking, especially like speaking itself. I've learned to actually speak. And it sounds weird to like say it out loud, but like when you experience it yourself, especially like those first 5 episodes are like the worst episodes I've ever heard in my entire life. So many so many so many you knows. I'm a very big guy. So I've been able to get those out of my life. I've completely stopped doing a lot of those stuff. A little of those linguistic sort of ticks that people have. I've been able to get rid of those things. But I guess just talking to people in general, like, has improved drastically. Like, even when I'm not doing the podcast, I'm just talking to people, like just someone at the store or something, or the
Yeah.
clerk lady. Like, we're having a great conversation. I'm asking about her scarf. Even this woman at Walmart in Albany, she's talking about her scarf. We had like a 20-minute conversation while I was checking
Sure.
out to get like cereal or whatever. So it's just little things like that that just kind of like happen. I didn't really learn anything. It's just through experiencing, talking to people and learning all the things. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is asking questions, but asking the right questions. Like, being able to ask questions where it really probes at something, when you're really trying to get something out, when you're really trying to zoom in on something, to be able to ask those questions, as well as asking questions when you're in a professional. See, I did a but when you're in a professional state,
Now you're
I'm
thinking
like,
of
I
it.
don't
Now
know.
you're thinking of it. And that's
I,
the great advice you gave me at the end of the podcast. All those things that I was probably doing throughout.
but even in a professional setting, when you're talking to, you're looking to get a job, you're looking to get an opportunity, like, to be able to ask questions where it could be a 15-minute conversation, but you could get an hour worth of information from that person just because you're asking the right questions. That's one of the big things that I've taken away from doing it. I'm trying to think. I just think a lot of the times, a lot of it happens very, very quickly. A lot of this podcast happened very, very quickly. I've just kind of came out of nowhere, but I've learned a lot about myself. Of course, I'd definitely say that's the biggest learning experience that I've had through this podcast. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about how I speak, about how I present myself, about how the words that actually come out of my mouth, the ways that I do it. There's just so much that goes into it, and I'm still, of course, learning so much more. But I definitely say the biggest thing that I've learned is to read more books. Literally. That's all I've been told. I hope that answered your question. It was such a tangent that I went on there.
No, I think it definitely does. I think that like again, like listening to your podcast, and I just even thought like, right, like 75 of doing anything, right? Like if you did 75 trials, that'd be a big deal. But like that 75 of doing something is really impressive. But I think that again, like I took it to myself. I'm like, okay, what's a lesson I can learn from that? And like looking what you've developed for yourself. I mean, I've made connections from people. I've started following people on LinkedIn and learned things from them based on your podcast. But that slow tick over time, and it feels like, right, you said it's all gone so fast. I imagine at episode 5, it didn't feel like you'd done. Like it would have been really easy to quit at any point along the time.
Oh.
And it would have been also, but even just right, you never had to start. And so I think that like some of that, I mean, to relate it back to kind of our conversation going to law school, right? It feels like things have changed as the podcast gone. You talk about getting sponsors, like things change in the process of like it kind of is the example of just needing to show up. And I thought your podcast was kind of a cool example of just putting another foot forward. Like the quote I always like is there's my the only way to the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? So you're not that you're eating this proverbial elephant, but you've done right. You're close to 100 podcasts. Not a lot of shows do that. And so I think it's really impressive, but I think a good lesson to anybody that you just kind of keep picking yourself up and keep going, and you just keep telling yourself you can do something, and you kind of get there, right? You don't realize it at 25 or 50, but then you start to go, wow, well, how much further can I go, and what else can I do with this, and how else can I help people either feel maybe not alone in the law school experience, or maybe not feel like, wow, like I think it's really easy in this experience or going to law school and becoming a lawyer to feel very alone, or feel like a person in my class is doing this one thing and I'm not doing that, or they've done trials and I'm not doing that, or they have a job that they like and I'm not. And it feels so easy to compare instead of putting on your own path of, okay, let me just take this next step. Okay, do I need to get a new job? Do I need to try something different at my job? And so I found it to be like looking and listening to your shows beforehand, a good example, right? You're pumping out content, man. Like content is the game, but you definitely continuing to do it, I think, is a good lesson of just for people going to law school or in the law of like, how can I improve myself and keep going and keep getting better? And sometimes it's just stepping forward and continuing to do things.
Of course. Well, I mean, thank you so much. I appreciate those very kind words. I mean, I don't think of myself in that light at all, but I think one of the big things as well, which is like surprising, not that I have motivational issues, but I like to lay in my bed sometimes. And
Sure.
I think in making the commitment to start the podcast and start doing it, especially the schedule that I created, I kind of put myself in a box where it's like, okay, Nate, I start doing like the Friday articles. And so it's like, all right, Nate, you do a Friday article every week. And Wednesday rolls around and I got no article. And it's like, well, Friday's rolling around. I got to do the article. People are expecting to do the article. And they're probably not even expecting anything. If I drop one, they'll be happy that it came out. But in my head, I sort of convince myself that if I don't do this, then people aren't getting what they need. So it's sort of like I've learned to really mentally trick myself a lot of the time and just be like, listen, we got a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. If Tuesday rolls around, there better be a podcast going up online.
Sure.
Thursday, there better be a podcast going on because that's just how I do it. And it sort of puts me in a way where it's like, okay, I know what I got to do. I know what I got to do every week. There's something I'm looking forward to. So that was also another thing that I sort of learned over time is like when you really commit to something, this is like very philosophical.
Sure.
I know like John Paul Sartre used to talk about how important commitment is in our being, that when you want to commit to doing something or commit to being someone, you have to fully commit 100%. You can't go back. So that's also something else that I've really learned is that when you really put your commitment in, when you really put that first foot forward, the other one is going to come following because you got to keep talking.
But even then, I think that like I think you talk about like I like to lay on my bed sometimes. I think there's like again in this line of work, right? And then billable hours or like busy work, it's easy to feel like at any part you need to be productive. Like I've had to as an adult stress myself like I'm like relaxation feels unproductive because I am not like again the bit broader societal concerns, not like we don't need to get into those at the moment, I think, but it's very easy to feel like you need to be productive. And again, at the same point, man, I'd say from the outside, it looks like you're being very productive. I imagine on the inside, it's like, well, I haven't written that Friday article. I'm never going to do it. No, like, I think it's easy. It's so much easier. Okay, but you're still getting it done, right? You're still doing like, you're still putting in the 40 hours. You're still getting the work done. You're still helping clients. I have to tell myself that sometimes I'll work a long week and then I'll take a 30-minute extra lunch. I go, oh, I'm not really being productive. And I have to remind myself like, no, I'm putting in the efforts. I'm like, I'm committed to this. I'm getting it done. I'm putting in the hours. But at the same time, sometimes it's much easier to, I think, I'm trying to be better at going, okay, I need to relax. I need to focus on this time outside of it and not let things get built up. And you don't need to be productive every minute to be the best version of yourself, right? It's that same, like that doesn't make you more valuable or less valuable to others or yourself.
I would definitely say as well, the perfectionism. I've totally lost the whole perfectionism thing. I used to be a huge perfectionist. I don't even know perfectionism at all. I've learned that it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it done. Just put it out there, put it out in the world. The beautiful thing about content, it's there forever. You'll never
Sure.
lose it. It will never go anywhere. If it sucks, it sucks. Everyone gets to see it.
Sure.
But you put it out there, you got that podcast out, you got that article out, and that's all that really matters. And if it's not the best, that's fine. You got another Friday to write an article. You got another Tuesday, Thursday to do another podcast and be better. So I always just focus on doing better than I did the last time, continually to improve, and of course, just reading as many books as I possibly can, because that's usually where my best writing comes from, which is very surprising sometimes. The world just works in opposite ways. You think that if you wrote more, you would become a better writer, but when you read more, you actually become a better writer. At least in my experience, that I found that when you read good writing, you sort of absorb it. It's like the copywriting thing. I know. Oh my God, I'm always forgetting people's names on this podcast. But one of the great writers, why am I forgetting his name? It's fine. But he was like the first person to really do the copywriting thing. He rewrote the whole Great Gatsby. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. But he wrote it a bunch. He did it like 5 times. He wrote the entire novel, just like copying it, and it made him a tremendously better writer because he knew what it felt like to be a great writer because he was doing it as much as he was copying it. You know, it's one of those another one of those mental tricks that you could put on yourself. I've learned very much. I can convince myself of absolutely anything. Anyone can convince themselves of absolutely anything. Like I can justify eating 10 Oreos because it's going to taste good and I'm going to feel terrible afterwards. But God, eating those 10 Oreos in that moment, my God, it's going to feel amazing. So if you could convince yourself to do bad things, you could convince yourself to do really, really good things and consistently convince yourself to do those things. And that's at least how I feel. Now I'm just sort of going on tangents here, and I'm just talking and talking. So
no, I throw you off. But I think no, I think it's all very good too, because again, like going back to what you're doing, you have to get it done, and I think it's really easy at the same point. I remember when my first brief went out, and there was a giant spelling error in the in the title of the document, right? The bolded, and I'm kicking myself about it. Now, looking back on it, it's like, okay, if the judge read that and they based the whole brief on a spelling error, they're not doing their job and they wouldn't do that. And if the other side looks at it and thinks I'm an idiot, okay, they're going to underestimate. So like it's very, I mean, at the same point, right? It's like for you is if somebody listens to every podcast and hates on every one of your podcasts, what are they? They're a listener and they're still giving you listens. Like they're still consuming the content. And so like my thought of coming on this podcast, right, is if one person hears my story, not that it's prophetic, but if they hear it and they go, okay, I can feel a little more comfortable. Like that was my thinking in this. But at the same point, you're probably, if one person for every podcast, like if you bettered 75 people's lives with all podcasts, right? That's a humongous like reach of just like making things better. I imagine it's higher than that, but I think that 75 people alone and that being it would be a pretty impressive number. And I imagine it's doing a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have no idea. I never look, but it's
I think that, you know what, man, why do you need to know at this point? I think you're enjoying it, right? You're on the ride. Why would you need that? I don't think now I think the answer is you don't need to check. You can't now.
No, I mean, I used to check the early days, but
Sure.
I had to change platform, so I lost all my numbers from like the first couple months. So then I just stopped caring. I was like, okay, it doesn't matter at this point. And I was like once I was like hesitant for a second of switching platforms from the original one I was using to Substack. Once I had that little hesitation because of those numbers, I'm like, nope, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Don't care about it. But back on task now, Damon, what's the last question?
I got you off task. I totally flipped it on you.
It's all right. Listen, I love talking about it. And when you get me talking about myself and the things that I do, I could go on forever. Like I said, my poor roommates, like Maurice and Max, I'm so sorry. But fourth to last question, live on Lawyers in the Making podcast, Damon, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you ever read, something to give a gift to someone.
I will definitely not be any legal related books because so this year I read, my goal last year was read 52 books and I did it so well that I've only been able to read 4 this year. Like I think I kind of burned out a little bit, but some of the like best ones I've read of late, Boys in the Boat, which is about the team from Washington that went on to win the Olympic gold. I'm not spoiling it because that's the basis, but went on the Olympic gold in when the Olympics was in Germany. I read it right before the Olympics. It was a book my dad gave to me and wouldn't stop talking about. So I was like, okay, I got to pick this up. That was great. I think one that's just made me think about, it's like, again, distorted my perception. The first 15 lives of Harry August was a recommendation, but it's this guy who every time he dies, he is born back into himself and kind of experiences his life again. And it's really cool, like time traveler drama, but very much like thinking the way the perception in the book of the life wasn't that it was just one time. And so like it was not how we can treat life, but it was a very different way to think of things. And then, I mean, I've read some great one, like Demon Copperfield was great last year. Homegoing, Hello Beautiful. Like I think I would do really good in a fiction book club. I just haven't joined one yet and I haven't had the time, but I think I really enjoy, like with the Olympics, I really enjoyed watching it, but I was like at a certain point, I was like, I need like an imaginary world. Like I need to go back to something that's enjoyable like that. So those are some of the ones that I've really enjoyed lately. But my friends who I'm in a book group with would hate on me because I've only read like 4 or 5 this year. So it's not been not as many this year, but I've not focused on fiction. So.
Well, that's good. They're all great recommendations. I've never heard of any of them. So that's usually a good thing.
Good.
I got more books to read now at my disposal. But third to last question here, Damon. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis? Either have to be through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, any podcasts you listen to that you recommend for people, any Substacks you read that you recommend for people. What is crossing the transom of Damon's mind on a daily basis?
I think transom assumes that everything I'm using the word transom assumes I'm consuming just nothing but grade A content. But like many other people, I continue to boil my brain on Twitter, now X, from time to time. I try and avoid it, but I really do like LinkedIn of late. I mean, I think in the last year I gotten the advice to start posting on there, and that it had just been, I think, more than it's helped me to think more of how I operate. But I've been really grateful to make connections on there. That's actually been the thing I've been most surprised about. People are generally nice on there, but it's really good to see, especially what I do. I see a lot of, it's just one of those things of seeing what other attorneys do. They go, oh, wow, like I wouldn't have thought of it that way, or just like lessons on it. Listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm trying to think. I'll do Reddit, and the internet is at my disposal at all times. So I definitely, unfortunately, my screen time is higher than it should be. But I think, LinkedIn, X, and then podcasts I listen to, I think some of my favorites, I really like If Books Could Kill and 5-4. And so I think that those are good. If what 5-4 is about why the Supreme Court sucks, right? And so it's a really, I don't know if you've heard that. I assume somebody's talked about that on here. If not, I think that's a great one. I do a lot of, like I said, plaintiffs' personal injury podcasts. And so I try and keep a broad, like I like Death, Sex, and Money, but I like it because it's a very, every interview on there is just someone's life that I have absolutely zero experience on. And so I think that like hearing somebody talk about getting like a permanent or becoming a paraplegic and like that experience, I feel like I'm able to be a more empathetic person because I can explore and see, wow, like just I better understand others. And that's when I've really gotten more into lately. But yeah, I have at least 4 hours of driving every week. So I'm listening to it. And I will say, I got to admit, I'm a little nervous being on your podcast. I'm worried I'm talking too fast, but I listen to podcasts at 2x speed. So I worry that I'm trying to match what I normally hear, which is probably not. I know my friends say I'm a total masochist for listening at that speed, but I think that, yeah. So I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts when I'm not spending time with the kid.
Well, I think you've done a great job so far in pacing yourself.
Okay, good.
Do not worry. But
at this point, it's too late, Nate.
there's no turning back.
We're not recording again, man.
But second to last question here, Damon. You're working, but you got that 2.5-year-old. So what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Damon?
So we're coming to the fall in New Mexico, which is the best season in New Mexico. And I'm like specifically, I knew this question was coming. And so in the fall, what we'll do is we'll get to have our windows open. We don't like our front door open, right? The air will be coming through. It'll be super cool in the house. I'll hang out with the kid. She'll dig in the sand in the backyard. It'll be so it's a Friday night. Great British Bake Off is coming. We'll probably eat some Indian food and watch Great British Bake Off. Put the kid to bed and kind of just enjoy like the sun setting in New Mexico. And then probably Saturday or Sunday, I'll hopefully wake up early and Man City's playing so I can watch a soccer game before the kid wakes up. And then we'll again enjoy a super crisp morning. And then we'll probably go to get a breakfast burrito and then see, again, there's like a sand play thing in Santa Fe that allows kids just free play in sand. And so we'll take the kid to that or the farmer's market and really try and have my weekends as much as possible be focused on just being present and being around the little one. And so that's like Friday and Saturday and Sunday morning. It's all like, what can we do as a family and go on a walk or be outdoors? And so ideal, especially with the fall coming up, that's the ideal.
Well, listen, I know last Sunday you were very, very happy. You're a very happy man. I was not. I was very, very sad. Right.
I went fishing during the first game of the season, so I actually have not even watched the highlights. I know you're a Chelsea fan, but instead, a very good friend of mine we've been needing to go fish, and so instead, I went out, enjoyed the outdoors, and I caught I'm not a good fisherman. Again, talking about like keeping going at something. I hadn't caught fish for the last 3 times before that, and I went out with my buddy and caught plenty of them. And so I missed Manchester City last Sunday, but it was a great chance to go up on the Chama. So.
It's all right. It's a long season. You got a lot more
Sure
games to watch. I unfortunately have a lot more games to watch as well. You fortunately do, so it's all right. It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
5 straight on the way. You never know.
Yep.
But Damon, last question here. I did this at the end of every episode. You probably know that well. What are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the League of Professionals out there in the world?
I mean, I think the thing I think of thinking of this question, it's like all like advice to myself, right? It really is like the best advice I can give is like, how would I give this to others? And it's first off, like, it's so much easier in this profession to be hard on yourself. And so like first starting with belief, but I really think that the 2 simplest things I've found, the attorneys that I've respected or the attorneys I've found to be successful, they have 2 things, and that's curiosity and confidence. And so my thinking is to anyone who's young or older or starting it is that if you can, whatever you can do to start to believe in yourself, right? You sure shouldn't start thinking that you're the big dog and that you know everything. But if you can recognize how you've gotten here and what you've done to build yourself up to like your first day as an attorney to where I am now, right? I've done that. I've had a lot of help but I can be confident in where I've gotten so far, but I'm also confident I can improve. So I feel like my job now really engenders me to go, not only do I feel good about what I'm doing now, but I'm going to be better. And so I feel what I do is able to breed confidence for myself, but then also curiosity, right? I feel like I'm still interested. I think a good lawyer is like always pulling that thread on the sweater. It's somebody who's going to ask that one more question that goes, oh, wait, in a deposition, they're going to get that answer. that kind of messes with the case. So they're gonna like it like blows up the case and for the other side. And so whatever you can do that really gets you excited, because that's why I wanted to be a tax lawyer for a while. Like I think I liked the problem solving. I felt like I could pull on the sweater and I was curious. And at the same point, I found like really doing what I get to do that. I get to like sometimes I've had cases where I have to call in a carpenter. And so I'm having somebody talk to me about carpentry expertise. I do a lot of medical malpractice. So I'm having this doctor explain. I mean, I was never going to medical school. It was never on my list, but I sure find it interesting learning about the medicine from a doctor and having them explain it to me. So my thought to be successful is, sure, you need to be curious. Like if you're not feeling curious, like you need to find something that makes you curious, but then also something that you can build your confidence in, that you feel like you can achieve, or that it's, I mean, sure, it's going to take time and plenty of those things, but that you can start seeing, okay, I've made steps and improved, and you can be confident in. So, and then all along the way is as much as you can be like kind to yourself. It's easy, I think, in a legal field to compare yourself to others. I mean, I think as anything, right, the thief of joy is comparison. And so it's really easy to do that, but I think it's so much easier to forget, right? You're in law school, or like you feel like you're competing with everybody, but you're really not. Most of you don't work at the same firm. Most of you don't work in the same line of work. And so it's much easier. And I've tried to be better about it. Like I'm focusing on running my own race, right? There's not a lot of people doing what I do at my age. And so I'm like, okay, I can be the best. I'm a lot more focused on being the best me than I am focused on being, right, competing with the people in law school, where I'm like, some of the people that I feel like I was like, well, they're doing really well. I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, they're doing stuff that I find tragically boring now. But they love it, right? And so that's not like, I think it's so much easier at the time to go, wow, you feel beaten or lost. But it's like, also, if you tell yourself, I can do this, and let me focus on myself, you're going to find a lot more paths. Like I wouldn't have stumbled into PI had I not been more focused on myself. I would have been worried about that comparison. So that would be my advice to people.
Well, those are some wonderful words of wisdom. They're beautifully said, Damon, but that is the episode. That is the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com. Lawyers in the Making, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.